How are my two friends doing on this wonderful Thursday?
Just gonna go the whole time.
No, we're
That's the
done.
podcast.
That's this
That's
bug, everybody.
It's the sing-song one. Oh.
Speaking of, this is a podcast. We call ourselves Jetpack Swords when we occasionally, once every 6 weeks, put out an episode. We record them more often. I'm just a lazy host. I'm just an incredibly lazy host. We normally talk about video games and stuff. I'm Greg. I'm joined by Packy and James. And, James, yesterday you couldn't make it because work sucks, and that's understandable. And Packy and I ended up talking for quite a fair bit.
I was gonna say, was that an hour-long talk? It looked like
it was
Yeah.
almost. It was
It's supposed to
almost
be,
like 50
20,
minutes.
30 minutes.
I blame Packy. It's all his fault.
I do
Anyways,
never
so
shut up.
yeah, James, how are you doing?
I'm okay.
Now that
Just
you don't have to work
living.
today.
Doing great. Had a lot of time off this past week since the last podcast episode because we were supposed to go to DC last weekend and we weren't able to make it. So I just took the PTO
Uh-oh.
anyway and stayed at home. So
Hey.
it was aight.
And what did you do with your time at home then?
Cleaned up some video games, read, usual at-home stuff.
Very nice.
I would not put reading in most people's usual at-home stuff.
Well, it should be.
It should. I'm impressed you are reading. That's such a good habit to have.
I used to be like a religious reader. Like Greg, I know Greg at least probably saw me in college, at least a little bit. I don't know if you ever saw me outside of my room,
No,
outside
high
his
school.
room, but high school too. But in college, I read every second I got when I wasn't actively in my room, which was, often walking between classes and everything. And then I've been trying to get myself back into it, and it's a struggle, which is stupid.
Just tough, right? Like, especially, I don't know, when I like to, it's finding that long stretch where you can really get into it, and then also how, as everybody knows, like how modern media affects your attention span is just
Yeah.
harder.
For me, it's always vacations when I read the most because I don't have my PlayStation or computer or anything. And like the last time me and my girlfriend went to Disney, I read, I think, like 2 or 3 books on that like week-long trip. It was great.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
nice. I mean, especially on the plane. I was telling
Yeah.
Packy,
Mm-hmm.
I was actually back home this past weekend, James.
Nice.
Just visiting family. It's like really quick Saturday and Sunday out, like super dense, just family trip with both Susie's and mine's family. And my plan was use the time on the plane to edit the podcast. And then I forgot how terrible Frontier's seats and, tray was. And so I was just like, this isn't going to happen. And then I was like, I wish I had a book at that point, right? Like, I
Yeah.
was like, or my Switch, honestly, right? Like, I wish I had my Switch and the new Mario Rabbids XCOM game that I can't remember what they called it.
that
That would
already
be
out?
perfect for that plane. Yeah, that's out. Yeah,
Oh, I need to pick that
I
up.
think. No. You need to wait for it to go on sale for like, $15 because it's a Ubisoft game technically instead of a Nintendo game.
Oh, so it goes on sale.
This is
Yeah, but it's that, like, it's the ultimate clash because it's half and half. So it does go on sale, but it doesn't get down to like $15 like XCOM and stuff does. Like, it's the Nintendo kind of sale where it never gets.
It does. It totally does.
No way.
They'll go super cheap. At least the first one did. The first one would go really cheap.
Oh, then never mind. I'm sure they will too. I always think it's funny. I liked those games, but I never liked the XCOM games. And those are just
I
like
love XCOM.
babies ripoff of XCOM.
XCOM's great. I'm ready for
I
it.
mean, there is a lightness to the Mario and Rabbids game that makes it much easier to get into, right? Like that XCOM does not have. Like XCOM is great game. Both of them great games. I haven't played the War of the Chosen DLC. For the second
Fantastic.
one, but
So good.
but played both of the base games, and yeah, they're just fantastic games. But I'll admit, yeah, there's something about Mario and Rabbids that, like, in a way, I'm just like, I'd rather go play that because, yeah, it's a little lighter, right, and it's a little easier to get into, more accessible, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Less thought going into each turn. Pretty simple math going on there.
But yeah, so I figured you guys, I'm just gonna let you two talk about Against the Storm.
Yeah, Against the Storm. I was like, I haven't played it in a while, so I need to play it before this. And I sat down and I meant to play like a little bit, just finish out a session I had already started. I ended up playing for 90 minutes, 2 hours, and lost so much time.
It's fine. It's a good game.
Such a good game.
I started trying to play on what is the normal difficulty, so not the easiest, but the one right above that. And
veteran.
Yeah, whatever just the standard is, that's not the easiest in that game. I was just trying to, take the step up after I've had like 10 hours or whatever in it. And I think my like win rate went from like succeeding in every settlement to now it's like I succeed in like 30% of them, and then the other ones I fail.
Oh,
I'm
that's rough for the normal
game. It gets rough sometimes, and it's never that I lose because of like starvation. It's literally because the game has a basically like a timer that runs, and if you do good objectives, it like reduces your like build up on that timer, but if you don't, it just builds up. I fucking fail that timer most of the time, which is like my settlement will be thriving, but I'm just not being quick enough to like hit.
Oh, you've maxed out impatience?
Like 6 times, yeah, on the normal.
Mm-hmm.
You just get bad rolls sometimes.
Tunnel vision. Yeah. I had the funniest I had a near loss today where because I haven't run up impatience. I think if you just, at least I've had a lot of luck just tunnel visioning like where reputation comes from and caring about literally nothing else.
I mean, sure, that's the point, right? But man,
I mean, it is tough. Things just spiral. They don't spiral. It is once you are behind, it's so hard to dig yourself out. You're just kind of fucked. Like once you're zeroed out on something, or today I had the worst one where in one of the events that I tunnel visioned and went to, it killed 10 people, and I failed it every 10 minutes, and I failed it twice. So I won with I think 9 people alive, getting my eking out the last of my getting the last cash for the last point, and here just everybody's fucking dead.
And the game's like, good job. You're like, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's over.
What's a normal amount of people alive for context, right?
Oh, sorry. Like end of the game would be 30 or 40 comfortably.
Yeah, I'd say 20 to 40 depending on the map and how you.
So like well under half of what you normally.
Yeah, right? 9 is what you would start with, maybe.
And losing people is pretty. It definitely can happen if you don't focus on it too much, but you don't very often have a bunch of people die. It's pretty. Usually you lose like in more standard way. Yeah, you just you run out of time.
I only ever lose people because of like the happiness system, and it's always the fucking harpies that are like being the little whiny characters who are like, this settlement's not good enough for me, and then they just leave, and I'm like, great, like cool, see ya.
I won't miss you. They're the ones I literally in the deaths. I had some, and then I lost them all. I've never seen the indicator for a race go away before. It was like, yeah, you're like, you don't have them. All right, cool.
Did you vote for the next race that they put that vote up on the main menu?
Oh no, I didn't see that. I just opened up the PlayStation.
Unless they put out an update today, whatever the one at the very beginning, I guess it was last week or maybe the week before. That update added a poll for the 5th race. There's 3 different options.
Oh, that's cool.
Is that, I'm curious. Is that in game?
Yeah, like it was like in the main menu, but yeah.
I wish more games would do that. Right? Like, I wish more games had in-game interactions for stuff like that. Like, Steam is great, and like your community forums are great, and your Discord server is great, and your Reddit channel is great, but like, put it in the fucking game. That's
a very small percentage of players will engage with your game in any way except for buying it off the store page and then launching it from their desktop repeatedly.
Yeah, I had this
everybody's going through that route.
I had this discussion a long time ago with someone on our Halo, and I had this discussion. It was like 3 comments back and forth, right? That was the extent of it, right? But like, it was like, they were like, oh, well, 343 did this survey or whatever. And I'm like, you understand that the people responding to this survey are like the tiniest fraction of the player base, right? Like the only people who are doing this are the ones that really, 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 really care, right? And it's just super unrepresentative of the actual thing. And like, put it in the game, right? Like, how hard is it to add a, one menu that you click one thing and you do your quick little survey or poll there? And so that's so cool that, the Against the Storm developers is doing this to like pull for the new, would you say race or class, or what would you say?
Race.
Yeah. Like, I just think that's so great. Like, I think
bats or foxes.
Oh. I think Fortnite, which is not a surprise that Fortnite's the shining standard. We've talked about this.
Of course.
They have had very quick, short feedback surveys in game, right? And like, I'm not going to take 10 minutes out of playing the game to respond to something, right? But like, if it's 2 questions, I'll click yes or no, or like pick one of 5 choices in the middle of the game, right? Like, if you want good representative data, shove your surveys into the game and stop making people go to some other site or something like that.
How does Fortnite run a survey though?
So like, I think theirs might have just been like, at least the one I'm remembering might have just been like a simple like, did you have like it was like the very simple like, did you have fun last match or something like that?
Like a written out one that pops out after the game.
It was just like I think it was after the game and the screen just pops up.
Not like audio or something like that.
Yes or no. No. Where are you going?
Because they're player base. Fuck. Well, their player base can't read, so like at least half of them. You gotta all be. So you ruined it.
I didn't have the patience today. I'm sorry. I couldn't.
I just wanted it. Oh.
It was a solid joke, but I couldn't get.
I love making fun of Fortnite. They do have the world's best developers. They do great stuff like that. I was gonna say, you might remember my first comment about this game was not much of the gameplay. It was the developer is wasted upon this game because they are just so like for a fairly, I think, niche appeal game. They just do all the right things. They do all the things that you would want a developer to do. They're incredibly consistent with updates.
Like I was gonna say, like literally the most consistent updates every 2 weeks. They have it put in the game's menu the date that it'll happen. They warn you in that same thing saying, hey, maybe should you back up your saves or just get ready that it might mess up your run or whatever. They have the roadmap clearly visible, like we already talked about. The poll was in the main menu.
Paggy, is this giving you like professional workplace environment vibes?
Of course, it is 100% a sprint. They are just running sprints and releasing.
Which, like, good for them, right? Like, I mean, there's a reason that, like...
Our sprints occasionally churn out garbage. Like, theirs always churns out something that meaningfully affects the game.
Yeah, and they
sometimes
actually listen to feedback, too.
Yeah. It's just crazy to see something that consistently affects the experience of the game when normally you could see people do updates every 2 weeks, 1 week, whatever, but usually within that is like, hey, we're just doing some little hot fixes, performance updates, background stuff. This, like, you can go through their updates, every single one, like either updates an existing system or add something new.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like they clearly like built around being able to support this, right? Like, because to do this, you have to have a good build and release pipeline. Like, you probably have good tests, right? Like, this is like, it's actually impressive. Like, to be able to ship 2 weeks, like, is it reliable or do they break shit every 2 weeks, right? Like,
I mean, we've only been playing it relatively a small amount of time. For I don't know how long it's been out, but it's been consistent in that time, and it's been steady and
it's
good
just
updates. It feels like
it's not buggy.
Yeah, everything you've said speaks to they're good software developers, right? Like that. Yeah. That's what you're describing. They're just good software developers that like they have a schedule. They have
No, that's a really good question.
Arguably, sometimes some of these things are like I was gonna say like it sounds like you're describing the perfect small to medium sized team, right? Because like the bigger it gets, the harder it gets in a way, right? But it's also there's enough that goes into setting up these pipelines and stuff that like it's a lot for one person to do while also making a game and stuff like that, right? So like
that's
it's
funny you could contrast that to the other game that I'm playing where it literally on the front page essentially says like this is made by one developer, please be nice. Like I promise I'm trying, but I'm not gonna be able to update frequently. I do other things.
Oh my god.
But James, earlier, did you say you don't know what a sprint is? I couldn't. I thought
I didn't say that, but sure, fill me in because I work in a trampoline park. So,
I mean, it's just there's a Paggy. It's all you, man. I hate Agile.
Oh, it's breaking up. I mean, Agile is not the best.
It's not. But well, the quick summary though is there has been a big trend in software development past 10-ish years. It feels like is kind of when it started. I mean, it's probably older than that, right? But like I wasn't in the industry 10 years ago, so I'm gonna say 10-ish years. And to be fair, like the first job I started at, it wasn't Agile right off the bat, right? Like they were just transitioning to it. So yeah, probably 10-ish years. big push towards this like methodology where you're supposed to be flexible and you basically, you have a roadmap, right? But like the roadmap can change arguably based on the results of like normally 2-week sprints. And so you normally at the beginning of every 2 weeks, or actually not the beginning of every 2 weeks, in the middle of the previous 2 weeks, right? You normally plan out what you're going to do for the next 2 weeks, try to achieve blah, 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 blah. And there's all this other like just essentially just bureaucracy around it, which kind of, frankly, in my opinion, sucks and it's really annoying. But yeah, no, I mean, it's just like, it's very common. It's very commonplace to have 2-week quote unquote sprints. And so it's, yeah, if he's doing 2-week releases on the dot, like it's 100% they set it up that way. They're like, all right, here's our planning board. Let's pull the things over we're going to do. And, like, it's great.
I think, pause real quick. James, is Greg lagging for you or is that just me?
He's okay for me.
Maggie, you are lagging for me.
You were earlier a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, it's definitely me then. I will pause here and fix this. I will say, just to add into that discussion, I looked it up. Airmite Games makes just this game, so I think it's their first one. Okay, and a mobile game, but it's 5 people.
It's 5 people, yeah.
Which is crazy small for what I expected for how consistent and how frequently they churn out stuff.
And how like well made it is too. It's so just polished.
Okay, that's definitely me. I am not going to torture people with me lagging. I'm going to go on mute real quick and fix my network issue. I will be back shortly.
Also, just turn off your camera too, since there's no point in wasting the bandwidth. Oh God. Anyways, James,
I just wanted to say one more thing on the topic of like the community feedback stuff, and having it like integrated in the game, and I guess furthermore also to what you said about. Obviously, the people that respond to the surveys, that especially the ones that are not integrated, where you have to go to the forums or the Discord, or even just like external
especially
website.
When they're long too, right?
Yeah,
like,
the only people that do that are the ones who are like. I mean, it's good that they're truly committed and like very focused, but it also can mean that those opinions are obviously like super pinpoint and like not representative of the whole, because obviously they're going to be the vocal minority, right? Uh-huh. But it's something I wish Destiny did, because Destiny 1. They always say that they're not trying to like favor either the PvP or PvE stuff, and obviously like their raids are a huge
bullshit. They favor the PvE. They favor the PvE. It's so obvious.
I disagree because to me they balance things so hard for the competitive scene, and then when you go try to fight stuff in strikes or in the raid or whatever, you're doing like what for certain guns or like certain classes, you feel like you're doing nothing because it's so overtuned to play against like actual people.
Interesting.
To me, Destiny's PvE should be like power fantasy shit. It's an RPG. Like you should be out there like rushing ads and just like, burning through enemies. And then sometimes you're playing it and you're like, I haven't played it in a little bit because I have phases. It's like my MMO basically, where I'll go in and out. But like sometimes it is so obviously overtuned. They really just need to make it so that way, like when you're playing PvE, it's one thing, and when you're doing the competitive, it's another thing. That's what it should be.
Yeah, I swear they have different dials to tune. Like guns, for example. Like I'm pretty sure guns have they have PvP stats and they have PvE stats. Like I'm almost positive they do. So that's really sad to hear, actually.
The other, I haven't played it in a while. I haven't played it since maybe 2 seasons back. And I'm probably going to play when Lightfall drops because I'm a sucker for Bungie and Destiny.
I mean, it looks great. I mean, it's a great game.
But I was going to say one thing that they do is they will do polls for what thematic armor sets they want to do, like the community wants for
that's cool.
Events and stuff. Usually Halloween is when they do it, because obviously like Halloween's like costuming, obviously. Or I think they'll do it for like New Year's or whatever. I don't play like in between the big releases a ton, but I always see the posts. And like one set will be like a dinosaur set, another one will be like a mecha set, and then the community picks which one, and then Bungie puts it in. But usually, from what I remember, those polls are not in the game. They're usually external. And I think that would be a cool thing if it was like actually in the tower. Like, let's say you were in the tower.
That would be sweet. Yeah.
They had like them up on like a vendor, exactly, like up on armor stands or something.
It's the event planner. You're going to talk to the event planner who's planning the Halloween event, and they want to know what you want as a citizen of the tower, right? Like
it fits
come on, Bungie.
So perfectly.
Oh, it's easy.
They don't do it, and I'm like. It doesn't actually matter because obviously it functions the same regardless, but it would be a cool thing.
And I want to say too, like, the way I stated earlier, I was like, there's no value in those other, and then that's not true at all, right? Like, there's value in getting the opinion of like the really hardcore fans who love your game, and they're the ones who are on Reddit or Discord or the forums, and like it's valuable to get their opinion. I'm not saying don't, like, it's worthless. Like, keep doing that. But also, for the love of God, survey your entire player base. And you can't survey your entire player base unless you put it in the game, right? Like, do both. Please do both. Also, because it would be really interesting to see what is the difference, right? Like, you know, and see, like, oh, because, you know, then informs, you know, obviously then you can extrapolate from that, right? Like, you do one set and you look at the difference, you know, like, oh, these people care about this and these people care about this, and like going forward, then you can then use that to, you know, obviously inform other decisions, like, based on that. I don't know. So, like, yeah, please do both. Like, it feels so obvious to me, and like, I understand that, like, it's probably not simple, but like, it can't be that hard. Like, I mean, like you said, you know, these against this 5 developer team, and, you know, making Against the Storm is able to do it, right? So like, it can't be that hard. Put it in your game, please.
There's probably like, it's like a bell curve where, like, if you have a small team and a small player base, it's easy to do it. Obviously, if you do it well, like they have. And then I feel like if you're a huge studio like Bungie or a Microsoft or a Ubisoft, you should easily be able to do it because you're going to have, like, the marketing and, like, development teams who are able to do that work. Like, it doesn't have to be the developers who make the game themselves doing it. And then you have the middle ones where it's like a AA game, and they're like, we have the people kind of, but not really. And at that point, it might be difficult, but...
Well, and also, like, more than likely, this only applies to live service games, too. And realistically, like, how many AA studios make live service games, right?
You know what? I disagree, because Against the Storm's not live service. It's just a game that gets updated.
It's early access, though. It's essentially the same thing.
At this point, we're not in the era where you buy a game on a disc and then it's never updated ever again. Every single game has some integration into, like, a internet module somewhere. Like, they all get updates during their lifespan, and that doesn't make them live service. Like, I think
they get updates, but it's the rate at which they occur, right? Like, having, you know, 3 performance or balance patches after the fact is very different than, in this case, your early access and you're adding new content or whatever every 2 weeks, right? Like, those are very different things in my mind. And it with, you know, Destiny in particular, right? Like, they have the seasons and blah, 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 right? But I mean, yeah, I don't know, right? Like, I feel like AA's tend to make, I don't know, maybe I'm just being narrow in my thought about this. I mean, I just keep thinking, I keep thinking AA, and I keep thinking, like, actually Hi-Fi Rush, I almost thinking as a AA. And you know, the most recent one before, I mean, yeah, that's fair. It's not.
It's published by Bethesda. It's not AA.
That's true, but it's not.
And it's not a small studio that made it. It's Tango. They've made multiple large-scale games before.
That's true. Okay, so Plague Tale Requiem. That was the most recent one I played. Plague Tale Requiem.
I was going to say, like, just say Plague Tale. We know that's what you want to say.
It is what I want to say. And like, I mean, you know, like, obviously, like, that's like, it's gotten patches, right? But it's not. There's no value in them adding a poll or something there, also, right? Like,
I play
depending on your game type too.
I play a ton of small games because I like a lot of niche genres. Obviously, city builders, the various strategy games I play a ton of those, and the vast majority of them are not labeled early access games. I play more big games that are labeled early access than I do small indie games labeled early access.
So I think
that's where the argument, I'm not going to say falls apart, but I think that's where it falters. Because everything now gets updated, even after release, and I'm not saying they have to add new content, but like we were just saying, I think having the community feedback, whether it's integrated into the game or not, I think every single studio should be able to do in some fashion. If a 5-man team can do it, any studio of any size is able to do it at least a little bit when it comes to updates and patches. And I think the studios that don't, I think those are much like, those are like, I'm not going to say they're the minority, but they're definitely, like, to me, it's more glaring. When a studio continues to update a game, but then also refuses to listen to any community feedback, that's, like, weird to me. Like, I'm not saying they have to bend over backwards to the community, because obviously consumers don't know what they want as, like, a whole. They just don't. But still, like, they should at least be able to see the feedback, and then they as a studio, as
there's a lot of consumers out there, right, who don't all want the same thing as well.
No, of course. Like, that's what I'm saying. They don't have to listen, but I think they should at least, Or I'm saying they don't have to implement, but they should at least listen.
Yeah.
I think
it's
become pretty rare for companies who are like who are very clearly unreceptive to the feedback. I think a lot of the last, pillars of that, and they're always like massive AAA studios, because definitely just by the nature of how indie games are made today, with many of them going through some early access period, and particularly they want that input, right? They just want eyeballs, and they're like, what do you like about this? As opposed to AAA games, which have like all these I think are made up of industry professionals who are a lot more like, this is our career and our job to know what is going to make the best game. So, while we will take feedback, we have a lot of confidence in our opinions.
They definitely they have the resources, but obviously they struggle with the market forces versus like the passion of their project, right? Where like, I'm sure there's people obviously at Bethesda or BioWare or, Infinity Ward or whatever, or like just Activision, where obviously the developers just want to make games. Like, obviously they want to like make money also, because that, gives them money. But I'm sure a lot of them are just passionate about the industry and like being able to make what they want to make. And then, of course, in the bigger studios, you get the market forces who do focus groups and all the testing and obviously, get in the way of that a lot of the times. So I don't know. What we were saying while you were gone was just like small studios do it really well, and I feel like big studios should do it better because they have the resources. But again, they have the conflicting issues. So.
I think it's funny. A lot of big studios would probably say their update cycles are slower because they have more layers of quality control.
That's fair too.
Often AAA games where we think of have the most glaring bugs.
Yeah, like the big bugs.
Yeah. Usually people are trying to do something graphically really impressive, but still.
The bigger things get, the more complex they get, and then the more levels of bureaucracy you have on top of it, and all that, right? Like
more stuff going on.
For sure.
Yeah, like you don't want to have to get like 5 levels of like approval to do something, right? And the small indie studios they do it. They are the approval, and it's done, right? So it's definitely the trade-off of it.
It's a lot more acceptable for them to be like, admittedly, one of the most recent updates for Against the Storm was like, hey, we introduced this blight mechanic. We think it was a good idea, but our implementation was terrible, and so we're overhauling it entirely. Yeah. So, they have more license to do stuff like that. It was still a meaningful update, right? It still changed the game. It made it fun to play. But I also think the Plague Tale Requiem example is a hard one because narrative-driven games are horrible choices for continuous updates.
So that's I think that's what I was trying to say, and I did a poor job saying it, is there's no point in getting feedback unless the feedback drives something. And maybe that's DLC, maybe that's just a normal update that you don't label as DLC, or maybe that's a sequel, right? It could be any of the things, right? But there's definitely a batch of games where like it doesn't hurt to collect feedback, but like they're not going to do anything with it, right? Like they have no plans for updates, they have no plans for DLC, they have no plans for a sequel, at which point like it's like, cool, that's good to know. And like, I guess we'll keep it in mind for our next game, but our next game might be completely unlike this at all, right? And so, yeah, like I think that's what I was trying to say, and I phrased it poorly in suggesting that AA games are less likely to do those 4 things, I guess, right? Like they're less likely to do, a patch or a DLC or something like that, right? Although they may do a sequel, right? And it's still valuable to like totally get feedback from your first game to inform your decisions making the sequel, right? Like, and so, I did a poor job phrasing it, and I should have left, size/quality of studio out of it and just focused on
it's many different factors, right? Yeah. They all layer together. If you think of the games that are like people really love the updates and how consistent they've been over a long period of time, almost always you can pick it from a handful of genres. It's survival crafting, roguelites, and any type of builder or simulation game. All games that just benefit from the more stuff that you add, like you always benefit from more.
Yeah,
you're not making a tight.
You made a good point with narrative, right? Like most of the time with narrative, it's going to be you're taking feedback for a sequel or for DLC. Right? Like if you're taking feedback for a narrative-based game, it's probably for one of those. Maybe quality of life, like you said, but more likely it's for a sequel or for a DLC, right? So, anyways, the moral of the story is put your feedback mechanisms inside of your game. Good job by the developers of Against the Storm for doing that.
I will say, as much as praise as we've given them for all that taking in feedback and acting on it quickly. I've given them precisely 0 feedback in about the month that I've played this game. I should go take that survey.
The thing is, like, I don't feel like I need to. I have not done anything in that game so far where I've been like, this is something I don't enjoy. Even when I'm getting like my shit punched in on those like normal levels, like I'm still like, I'm enjoying this. I'm just stressed, and I it's okay. I'm just stressed. And I gave feedback. I picked one of the races. I picked the frogs.
Well, and see, that's perfect too, right? Like, have 1 or 2 questions that are not a free form text field. They are multiple choice or yes or no, right? 1 or 2 of those, and then give them a link to go take a more detailed one if you want in a website, right? But inside the game, it should only be very quick to answer questions like, what race do you want next?
Yeah, community polls have overwhelmingly been the best way that this is done. Like, RuneScape got a lot of praise for doing that within their game. Letting people, WoW's done this a couple times for like trivial stuff, like picking, hey, what free mount do you want at the next event? And like, it always goes over very, very well because people feel like they're heard, even if you're giving them like a fairly insignificant. Exactly. Like,
it's like we already did the work for both of these, but like, which one do you want to be free and which one do you want to cost money in the future?
That's what
Destiny which one do you want now or get it later? If I recall correctly, if I remember the designs for the other 2 for the event where I remember voting, they've still not yet been put in the game because they were just sketches. They're just like, hey, we have some sketches here. You all pick one of these 3.
Fair enough. Maybe they hadn't already done the work. Maybe I'm overly negative.
No. They definitely do that so much.
100%. Yeah. So one thing that was interesting that we talked about yesterday, James, which we'll just briefly mention as well, is ChatGPT is blowing up.
I know we've obviously talked about it. If anybody wants to fill me in, I know nothing about it.
It is a very impressive large language model that, based on the question you ask it, it scrapes out, at a very dumb level, it scrapes out some keywords, and then it assembles a reasonable is the key, not actually intelligent, reasonably legible response that may not be factually correct, but
reads coherently.
Yes, reads coherently, and it is, quite frankly, it is the most impressive chatbot I've seen to date. Right? Like, it is. Right? Like, I mean, it's very impressive. Like, it's not perfect. It has flaws.
I would just Google it and like play around with it a little bit. Okay. Like, it truly, it's very genuinely very interesting to see how creepily well it can like simulate certain kinds of human speech.
Yeah,
it is really, so really impressive.
One of the things I mentioned yesterday is like, I don't feel like we're obviously very far off from someone using this to create a text adventure or create a dungeon master type thing, which is essentially a text adventure anyways, right? But like, you could very conceivably, right? Because those things are like text adventures, for example, are very historically like, they're preset things, right? You go up, you go left, you go right, you go down or something, right? And you could conceive a world where like, instead of just saying up, you say, I go up and I explore the room. And then it gives you some response of some kind about like, oh, here's this room and blah, 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 like, and so like, it kind of opens these doors to like, again, it's not perfect, right? But like, it's pretty good. And like, you can see the applications in games, right? Like, it could be like a character in a game, like an NPC in a game, like you have an actual conversation with the NPC, right? And it's completely dynamic and done on the fly, right? But still in like that NPC's personality or something, right? Like, in the past we talked about like, oh, you could use all these fancy AI and ML shit to do really fancy things, like voices is one of the things we talked about before. But honestly, like, this is showing like the text application is really close, right? Like, to literally just get back a string of text that is, what you're asking for is. So I don't know. It's very funny. Interesting.
I think we talked about this. I think the interim step that I'm really not looking forward to, that we're getting ever nearer to, is indie developers AI generating dialogue and using AI generated voices to read it.
Yeah.
And it's going to be so bad, or at least like a lot of it's going to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be like an enjoyable game with just even more of a phoned-in story than you've ever experienced.
It's going to be bad for everything except for the 1 or 2 thematically appropriate indie games that use it. It'll be like a cyberpunk game where you're only interacting with robots, and then they do that, and you're like, oh, this is actually thematically cool. There'll be one of those, and then everything else will be chasing that same attempt, and it's not going to work out.
So that was, that's blowing up the news recently. And like I said, like, people are going to apply this to games, like, very, very shortly, I expect. Like, this year, someone will do some demo or something showing how they've integrated some GPT-3 large language model into their game or something, right? Like, and it'll be pretty cool when we get there.
This sounds like what Watchdog Legion was trying to do.
Oh, that game has so much potential.
Oh, with all of the like random NPCs.
Not capitalize.
Yeah.
Because
I think a lot of their stuff was AI generated.
Made me sad.
I believe that.
Made me very sad.
Or the other semi-interesting thing that's been in the news or whatever recently is on the Activision acquisition. We've talked about it a number of times. Most of the times it's worthless to talk about because it's in this, big, long regulatory review. The only reason I'm even mentioning it this time is because there's actually something even remotely actionable recently, which is the UK one basically they said in its current state, we would not approve this deal, right? And they said, here's a list of things you could do that would make us approve this deal. And it was funny because the list basically boils down to three things: sell Call of Duty to someone else, sell all of Activision to someone else, or sell all of Activision and all of Blizzard to someone else. And at that point, they're just buying King, right? Like they literally just be buying King at that point.
So it's just like sell Call of Duty or sell more from there.
Yeah,
that just seems like a suggestion because everything else includes Activision, which is just larger, and then it also add, so you could just tack on more. They're just telling them to sell Call of Duty. That's such a absurd list.
Yeah, no, the first one was the only one of their suggestions I was like, that even seems kind of remotely reasonable. And to be fair,
I want to look at this. Are they just dumb, or is it a genuinely valid argument that Call of Duty specifically is?
They're just
important?
Dumb. They're just dumb.
Okay.
They're 100% just dumb.
I want to look at the market statistics for shooters because I feel like they're just not dominant.
They did a survey, and I'm making the number up, so don't quote me on this, but it was something like it was less than 35% of PlayStation, and again, the number is not 35%. I just remember is less than that. Less than 35% of PlayStation players would buy an Xbox and not a PlayStation if Call of Duty became exclusive, right? And so then it was like, even if then PlayStation loses whatever that number was, they still have more consoles sold or still more players than Xbox.
A survey like that isn't going to sway parliamentarians. I think that you'd have to have hard data on its capture of the market. So that must, I would only imagine you do that if Call of Duty is just Call of Duty is 70 to 80% of shooter players play Call of Duty, and it's that important to them. So clearly that one company who produces console having it would be absurd. I just didn't think Call of Duty was that important. Clearly it's the biggest one, but I thought it wasn't overwhelmingly dominant. That
seems to be the only thing they care about. That's not entirely true. They also mentioned cloud gaming, which is hilarious. It's they're worried about Microsoft establishing dominance in that space, and that if they get Call of Duty on there and Call of Duty's only available on whatever. And it's you realize that Call of Duty on cloud gaming sucks, right? No one wants to play that shit on streaming.
You are
cloud,
losing,
right?
You are accurate on that.
And so it's just
not the reason.
I don't know. Those were the two things. It was Call of Duty and cloud gaming are their hangups. And so I don't know. But that being said, I could see a world where Microsoft lets someone else buy Call of Duty and they acquire the rest of Activision. I could totally see that. I'm assuming not for the same price, right? I'm assuming there's something that goes on there, right? But absolutely, right?
Wait, what do you mean for the same price? I mean, I don't think they're going to pay billions of dollars for just Call of Duty. No.
Well, no, sorry. I mean, I don't remember what it was, 60 something billion dollars, right? I'm saying obviously Microsoft would not pay the 60 billion or whatever if they are not also getting Call of Duty, right? And so I'm assuming it's some it's that minus whatever the other whoever buys Call of Duty pays, right?
Yes,
essentially. That being said, like, I mean, I could totally imagine them still buying Blizzard and King and just everything like not Conquer, fuck. Oh my god, I'm retarded. What is it, guys? It's not fucking Conquer. Crash.
Candy Crush?
Like, Crash and Spyro and
Clash
like all, you know.
Crash Bandicoot?
Yes, I was thinking of Crash Bandicoot, yes.
Okay.
Point being, like, there's a lot of IP there that's still worth a lot of money. That's not Call of Duty.
I think all the IP I mentioned also they would get besides Crash Bandicoot.
I don't think Clash of Clans is them, but yeah.
Is it not
Candy
them?
Crush is.
Oh, maybe I'm crazy. Yeah.
I don't think it is. I think it's Supercell
yeah, they get
or
tons
some
of stuff.
shit like that.
It just introduces new complications, right? Like now they have to find somebody who would want to buy Call of Duty, who will pay a reasonable price for it. Be able to restructure their deal. They just
EA or Take-Two or Ubisoft, one of them would buy it.
Yeah.
One of them would buy it 100%.
Yeah, but buy it and buy it at a fair price, right? Like they also know that they have.
And also, it's like
Microsoft over the coals.
Do you get the IP or do you get the IP in the studios, right? Like, because if you get the IP without the studios, that shit's worth nothing. That shit's worth a fucking dumpster. Like, that's all it's worth.
Definitely going to be. You know what? I'm really curious because I imagine the verbiage of their recommendations were very specific in what they wanted Blizzard Activision to do.
They were not as specific as I would have liked.
I want.
Like I said, I just thought it was interesting because it was one of the first pieces of news. Like, I see an article about this at least once a week, and every time it's worthless. It's so stupid. It's like the exact same thing as last week. I'm like, cool. Okay. This is one of the first things where it's like they explicitly said no, and they explicitly gave options on how to remediate the situation and let the deal go through. And so I thought it was very interesting. Again, because I think selling Call of Duty is not completely unreasonable. I think it's stupid and I think it's pointless, but I also don't think it's an unreasonable task, right?
It's like bonkers. To me, that's the one thing they picked in all of this. Clearly, they must have had something going on there. But yeah, it's not even like the biggest.
Well, they had a nice lunch with Jim Ryan from PlayStation. That's what went on there. They had a very nice sit down lunch with him, and he said, "Don't let this deal go through. I want Call of Duty on PlayStation." Like that's what it is.
Yeah, I would love to look at the statistics around Call of Duty. Clearly, more people have Call of Duty than I ever thought.
I was thinking, if you just look at shooters alone, like even we'll just say flagship shooters. So like an Overwatch, a Battlefield, a Call of Duty, Counter-Strike we'll throw in there for, tradition. None of the other ones have a release that comes out yearly or even like every 2 years. I think that alone, just Call of Duty is a franchise, not a specific numbered one. But as a franchise, I think that alone gives it the like staying power in terms of numbers, just because like nothing else comes out. And obviously people love novel new things, even if it's the same shit, the year before.
Oof. All right. New survey is getting a lot of traction that I'm seeing. In a survey, 88% said they choose Sony's console because of the availability of one or more games. Of that 88%, 73 said it was Call of Duty.
Oh no.
So 69% said they picked for
Who'd
PlayStation.
They interview?
These numbers don't add up. It's one or more. So they definitely, like, one of the games they bought a PlayStation for was Call of Duty, but that was not necessarily the only game. So 73% of people who want to buy a PlayStation that they surveyed wanted Call of Duty. So that's huge. That is revealing, but that's not the only game that they care about. I really want to see what number of people who have PlayStation play Call of Duty.
It's what number would not buy a PlayStation if it didn't exist there, right? Like that's the number that matters, right? Like it's not like, are you going to play Call of Duty on PlayStation when you buy your PlayStation? It's would you not buy this at all if it didn't exist there, right? Like that's the real question.
There's no good data on this. I know good data if this exists, but they just don't surface it, which is lame. Someone's like, we have this Dexerto, my favorite news outlet, put out there like we have the percentages on this. What is it? Warzone data reveals how many more players are on console than PC. It is a Twitter poll that they are referencing. It's like Jesus Christ.
So from the CMA docs, if you're curious, I found the thing. They categorized this as like, I think theory of harm or something. So it's 24% of respondents, and I don't know if the CMA did this themselves. I'll try and find that in a second. It says 24% would have bought an Xbox, a PC, or no gaming device at all instead of a PlayStation if Call of Duty did not exist on PlayStation, right? So that's the number that matters, is 24%. And again, Sony can lose 24% of their player base and they can all go to Xbox, and it doesn't matter. Sony's still beating them in every metric except subscription revenue. That's basically the only thing, right? Like, and so like that, you know, I don't know. It's interesting.
They do also lose out on their percent of the Call of Duty sales, which I'm sure is substantial. But yeah, just with the immense number of games, for them to pick one game and be like, it is because of this one that.
Yeah, no, that's it's like they're completely ignoring. I mean, they're not completely ignoring, but like it feels like they're kind of glossing over like the rest of that portfolio there, which is fucking huge, right? Like Call of Duty is not. I mean, it is a significant part of Activision Blizzard, right? But like there is a lot there, right? Like it's way more than God.
More money.
Yeah,
like, you can very easily find that information.
Which so I don't. I sent you all the link to the thing. It's huge. Obviously, don't read it all, right?
I saw that. I didn't realize when we first started talking that the survey we were referencing was one that was distributed by the decision makers here, which definitely lends a lot more credibility to that survey. But it's just crazy to me that this is. Yeah, I'm gonna end up reading through. Okay, yeah, they have revenue numbers.
It's really long. Don't read through it all. Just read through parts. Like just
how many pages? I'm gonna skim it. I mean, there is no way that I skim through likely 250 robust.
It's 275 pages is the total thing, including sources. Like including sources and stuff like that. Yeah.
So, but I would imagine of that 250 is like, just reading through here, it is clearly, it's legalese too. There's no way I make it through this.
Oh, it's really rough, right? But you can find the headers, then you can go from the headers, right? Like
exactly. I just want to look at I tuned to random page 25 that has just straight. I just want to read the numbers. I just want to read what numerically Call of Duty has meant to both platforms, and I imagine amongst all this data, you can piece that together. But that's just curiosity. I likely will not do this. It's a very idle curiosity.
So I just don't do it. It's
this is definitely fueled by the fact that I think Call of Duty is so mid. I'm like, this game can't be that important. It's like League of Legends when people are like, League of Legends is the biggest esport.
You're not wrong.
Like, please.
Like, I love Call of Duty. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love it a ton. And like, I understand that lots of people play. Like, we have Matt. Matt only plays COD, right? But like, it's still not like, it's not the end all be all make it or break it thing. I don't know. It's just funny. Yeah. Like, it's a big hang up for them, and I just don't understand it because there's so much more to that package than Call of Duty, right? Like it's just ridiculous. And yeah, like and obviously like the three remedies they suggested, right? Like which are basically all selling off things, right? Like those are not the only things they'll accept, right? Like they very clearly like come back to us with other options, right? Like and you know like so maybe the other option is they, instead of like entering into a 10-year contract, which they have already agreed to with Nintendo and Valve, maybe they enter into a lifetime contract to always publish Call of Duty on other platforms, assuming licenses there don't change or something, right? Like, you know, and maybe that becomes acceptable. All in all, it's just kind of interesting. Like it officially got its first rejection, quote unquote. Not like hard rejection, right? But like rejection with possible remedies, and so it's kind of interesting that progress is being made, and maybe sometime this year there will be an outcome here one way or the other.
I'm lost in this now. I need to tear myself away.
It's because it's really interesting. Like I
jumped to the conclusion section. There's clearly an understanding of one of the things that they highlighted that they saw as a harm was that they acknowledged like, hey, we acknowledge the inclusion of Activision content in Game Pass on a day and date basis is a potential benefit for gamers in the UK that would not arise absent in the merger. This would mean that gamers could access Activision content, such as the most recent releases of COD as a part of Microsoft's multi-game subscription bundle, where absent the merger, only older games might have become available. So at least there's like some moderate understanding of how this would actually work.
Well, no, and they
really
also
expected them to not.
They also, you know, I'm shitting on them for saying, like, you know, implying that Call of Duty isn't important. It's ridiculous for them to get hung up on it. But, like, it is their job to not think about even the 10-year impact of this deal, right? Like, it is their job to think about the 20, the 50, arguably the 100-year impact of this deal. And even if it's not right away, even if it's not tomorrow or next year, right? Like, what impact does this have on competition and consumers, right? And like they understand that, right? Like they do. And I think that's why they also reference cloud gaming a lot, is because they're concerned that like, and maybe in that case it's less about COD and more about like Diablo or something, right? Or just all of the above, right? That like, if that adds to like it's only available for streaming on this thing, then et cetera, et cetera. Packy, you want to read that quote?
Oh, sorry. I forget that pasting stuff in chat like immediately snaps your attention to it in Skype. I just wanted to, it was one thing I wanted to talk about at the very end there. I just thought it was interesting. I keep reading this and I can't help myself. They clearly, as Microsoft has publicized many, many times throughout this, they're like, we are not going to, make it exclusive and all that. And like, it's not going to be that big of an impact. I think part of it, they might have promised they weren't going to put it on Game Pass, or at least not publicize they're going to put it on Game Pass. And they've just, like, one of their conclusions here that the CMA came to was like, they're definitely going to start putting on day one on Game Pass, and that's going to have a huge impact.
Well, and it's not just that. It's they're going to put it day one on Game Pass, and it's going to make it such a valuable service, and it's going to, like make competition that much harder for Sony, that then, and this is Microsoft's goal, right? Like, they're not anyone's friends. They're a business, right? That. Like, they are going to raise the price, right? Like, it goes on there and they raise the price, and it doesn't matter because they won. They already have so much content on Game Pass at that point that you're SOL and you basically are like not forced into doing it, right? But like, it's just, it makes it too hard for other people to compete, theoretically. I don't believe it's true, right? But like, I can appreciate that that's the point they're making, that like, yes, Game Pass is excellent. Yes, this provides a great choice for gamers. Yes, it's a great deal. And it would be great for gamers to be able to play these games day and date on there. That's all great, but it could potentially give them too much power, meaning that they can just continue to raise prices, which is bad for the consumer, right? Like, and that is ultimately the goal, is to protect the consumer. So, it's interesting. I'm glad I set you down a extremely long, legalese
I'm going to waste so much time in this document, and I'm going to learn so little valuable information about a game that, again, I objectively dislike and don't care about.
It's like I said, it's because it's just interesting. Like, I just find it interesting, right? Like,
it's something I find generally with, it goes outside of games, when legislatures are forced to interact with industries that they objectively don't understand, and they are forced to bring in experts to help them try and navigate this while still approaching it with the same formality that they approach every topic. It also happens a lot in far more egregious ways with like the hard sciences, right? Like, anytime they're forced to regulate any industry that involves knowledge of chemistry or biology, like, experts laugh them out of the room.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said about like some of the other reason that it's kind of silly, like some of these hangups, is like, if you compare this to, say, Disney buying Fox, it is hilarious that went through and this is being questioned, right? Like, in terms of like absolute market share that like that resulted in versus this resulting in, particularly with like Disney becoming the main stakeholder in Hulu specifically, right? Like, it is hilarious that was not questioned, and this is being questioned as thoroughly as it is around more or less a single game, right? Like, it feels like
lobbying. It's the people who are currently in office.
There's lobbying, and there's a fair bit of political posturing to puff your chest and make it feel like your job matters, which it does. Again, not discrediting these people. Their job matters. Antitrust is a serious thing. Fuck monopolies. Monopolies suck. It's just that, like, again, like Disney buying Fox or like telecoms, right? Like, Comcast in the United States is fucking terrible. Or like, United States, it's I think Kroger entered into agreement or is in discussions to like acquire or merge with Safeway, I think, which like those are two of the biggest grocery store chains in the US. And to the point where like there's going to be a lot of states where now that is essentially the only option, right? Like, it would be a Kroger and a Safeway, and now it will just be that, right? And so like, it's just kind of absurd that like that will probably go through. Like, honest to God, like that'll probably go through. And that is just, in my opinion, like objectively worse than any potential outcome of this acquisition. But it's also because food matters a little more than playing video games. True story. Anyways, that's all I got.
What? So I'm lost. We have to end the podcast now because I just can't stop reading this thing. It's really interesting because I've also misinterpreted their main argument. The main argument is essentially like everyone agrees it's going to lessen competition. That's not questioned here. Microsoft's argument is essentially like we will create an efficiency for consumers, which is worth the reduction in competition. And the conclusion at the end is no. That we still think people are going to pay. And because you're a subscription, people probably, like, we can't accurately say people will end up paying less over the course of that subscription and get more value because
they'll raise the price too, right? Like they're going to. It's going.
Well, it's not just that. It's like, how do you say what percent of that per consumer is because of Call of Duty? Like, you can't throw a number at that. And so Microsoft's going to throw the lowest number. Anybody interpreting it unfavorably of them is going to say it's the full, $15 a month. Essentially they're throwing up their hands here. They're like, you can't make the argument that the subscription is more cost efficient. So if you can't make that argument and we all agree that you're lessening competition, what are we doing here?
It's fair. To be fair, there's still options, right? Like, and even if it's not price, it's options, it's choice, right? Like Call of Duty's not on any cloud services at the moment. It would be with this deal. It's not on any subscription services at the moment. It would be with this deal. And even if the overall price is not necessarily higher, it still gives consumers choices in how they want to do it, right? And so even if net price isn't the same, having choices is good most of the time, right? But again, nothing is also stopping Activision from doing those things on their own, right? Like there's nothing stopping Activision from going to NVIDIA and saying, hey, put Call of Duty on GeForce Now. And there's nothing stopping Activision from starting their own cloud streaming service, right? Or whatever they want, right? Partnering with Sony or Microsoft or does anyone else have a subscription service like this besides PlayStation Plus and I guess Ubisoft, but they wouldn't go to Ubisoft, obviously.
No idea.
I guess the difference is Activision could start their own again, right? Like they could arguably start their own for like, here's Call of Duty, here's Crash Bandicoot, here's Spyro, here's WoW, here's Diablo, all in, the Activision Game Pass bundle, right? Like, and so I think that's the other argument there, right? Is like, yeah, technically, as of now, it would be creating more options, but that's just compared to the current state, and there's nothing saying that like those options wouldn't appear anyways, essentially.
Yeah. It's interesting is the wrong word, but
no, it's the right word. It's boring, but still interesting.
No, again, I'm reading it now. Now that I'm reading it, full-throated, explained in as many words as you possibly could cram into the simplest explanation, I'm not sure that it is interesting.
Well, on that note, do either of you have anything else you want to discuss?
No, I gotta go. I have to begin my homework.
No.
Reading this entire thing.
Jesus fucking right. Dude, don't read the entire thing. It's so long. It's so boring. I didn't read the entire
thing.
Fortnite.
Fortnite is in here. It's interesting again.
Oh, shit. All right, I got to search Control F for Fortnite. Anything from you, James?
No.
Alrighty. Well, I'll probably go ahead and, since we talked about this so much at the end, if I ever post this video, I will put a link to this document in the description of this podcast. See ya, everybody.
See ya.